Welcome back to the deep dive. I was out for dinner last night at this bustling place. Great food, packed tables, the whole vibe was just right. And I found myself looking around.
Okay.
Not at the menu, but at the operation.
hmm
We interact with the hospitality industry constantly. It's the backdrop of our social lives. But I think most of us, we treat it purely as a consumer experience.
Absolutely. It's the invisible infrastructure of our social lives. And frankly, it is one of the most deceptively complex sectors in the entire economy.
Deceptively complex is the perfect way to put it, because today we aren't talking about Michelin stars or, farm-to-table trends.
Hmm.
We are talking about the incredibly high-stakes game of buying, selling, and developing the real estate underneath those restaurants. It turns out selling a bistro or wedding venue is not like selling a three-bedroom ranch house.
Not even close. It's a minefield. You've got zoning laws, complex debt structures, and especially in the region we're looking at today, liquor licensing.
Which is a nightmare all on its own.
It really is. It's essentially a high-value logic puzzle where the pieces, the land, the business, the license are all moving at different speeds. You drop one, the whole deal shatters.
So, to help us solve that puzzle, we are doing a deep dive into the source material from a firm that claims to have turned this chaos into a repeatable science.
Right?
They are called Bielat Santore and Company, or BSC. And right off the bat, looking at their brochure, they don't call themselves real estate agents.
No, they don't. They define themselves as architects of the deal,
And engineers of a real estate system.
which, initially sounds a bit like marketing fluff, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Architects of the deal.
A little bit.
But when you actually dig into their track record, the title starts to make sense. We are looking at a firm based in New Jersey that has been operating since 1978.
Wow, since 78.
And in that time, they claim to have sold more restaurants and food and beverage properties in the state than any other company.
That is a massive market share for a boutique firm. But the number that really anchored that architect claim for me was, it was about the money.
The financing.
Yeah, they haven't just moved dirt. They've facilitated over $500 million in financing.
$500 million. And I want to pause on that because that distinction is so vital.
Okay.
If you are just a standard broker, you put a for sale sign in the window and hope someone comes along with a check. You aren't touching the financing.
Right.
If you are facilitating $500 million in debt and equity, you are engineering the business structure itself. You're intimately involved in the capital stack.
So our mission today is to unpack the science they talk about. We're going to break down their proprietary branded selling cycle, which sounds like their secret sauce.
It does.
We're going to look at why confidentiality can literally kill a restaurant deal if it's mishandled. And we're going to explore how they pivot from selling cafes to building massive residential developments.
A lot to cover.
But let's start with the people. Who are the architects here?
So it's a partnership, and it's a classic example of complementary skill sets. You have the founders, Barry J. Bielat and Richard R. Santore.
Okay, let's break them down. Who handles what in this equation?
Well, Barry Bielat is the founder. He started this boutique concept way back in 1975. The materials describe him as the strategist and developer.
The strategist. Okay.
Think of him as the financial engineer. His wheelhouse is structuring debt-sensitive transactions. When a deal is messy, the cash flow is inconsistent or the assets are distressed, he's the one figuring out the investment strategy to make the math work.
So he builds the skeleton of the deal to make sure it doesn't collapse under its own weight?
Exactly. Then you have Richard Santore, who they call the deal maker and technologist.
The deal maker.
He's described as the outside-the-box thinker. He manages the sales, the acquisitions, the actual connections between buyers and sellers, but he's also the one driving the tech side.
Which we'll get to later with their database.
Sure, that seems to be his domain.
And together they use this term quarterbacking the deal. I love that analogy.
It fits perfectly. In residential real estate, an agent lists the house and often just facilitates paperwork.
Right, waiting for lawyers.
Exactly. In commercial hospitality, the way BSC does it, they manage the transaction from the initial offer through financing, environmental checks, the liquor license transfer, all the way to closing.
They're calling the plays for every single yard gained.
Because there are so many defensive players trying to stop the deal town councils, banks, inspectors.
Yeah. Their core values list things like client interests and service, which, you'd expect. But relationships seems to be the one they hammer home.
Well, that's pragmatic, not just sentimental. The restaurant world is incredibly small.
True.
If you help a chef buy his first location, and you don't screw him over on the lease terms, he's going to use you for his second.
And when he wants to sell.
Exactly. It's a life cycle business. If you burn a bridge in hospitality, everyone sees the smoke signals.
Let's talk about the tools they use to keep those bridges intact. They offer a complete strategic toolkit. What is actually in the box?
It covers the entire lifespan of a business. Obviously, there's the brokerage, the buying and selling. But before that, they do feasibility studies and investment analysis.
Which is basically just asking, will this actually work?
Right. Or, more specifically, does the math support the dream? A lot of people want to open a restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Fewer do the market analysis and business valuations to see if the local area can even support a $50 steak.
Right.
BSC does that rigorous checking.
And it looks like they help with concept design, financing, and site selection, too.
Sounds like they're trying to remove the guesswork.
Or at least manage the risk.
Exactly. In this industry, passion often overrides logic. Their toolkit seems designed to inject logic back into the process before anyone signs a check.
That brings us to what I think is the technical centerpiece of their brochure, the branded selling cycle.
Yeah.
This is their proprietary 4-step system.
Yeah.
It feels very structured for something as, well, chaotic as the restaurant business.
And that's the whole point. They've moved away from the art of selling, relying on gut feeling, and tried to turn it into a repeatable science.
So step 1 is preparation and packaging. When I think of selling a house, this is, staging the living room and taking nice photos. I assume this is a bit more involved.
Oh, much more involved. It starts with evaluation. And this is a key differentiator. They explicitly say they don't guess the price.
Okay.
They formulate financial projections based on actual data to find the most effective selling price.
Effective is an interesting word choice there, not highest.
Because the highest price might never sell. Effective means the price that will actually clear the market while maximizing the return for the seller.
So if you overprice it, the listing just goes stale.
Exactly. People assume something is wrong with it because it's been sitting for 6 months and the value actually drops. Getting the number right on day one is critical.
And then they dress it up. The brochure mentions visual assets and positioning.
Right. They treat the restaurant like a product launch. Professional photography, videography, a features and benefits list. They are crafting a narrative.
What's the story here?
Yeah. Is the value in the location? Is it the cash flow? Is it the brand? They package that into professional presentations. They aren't just selling 4 walls and a stove. They are selling a business opportunity.
So the product is ready. Step 2 is the data advantage. This is where the technologist side of Richard Santore comes in.
And this is where the gap widens between a generalist broker and a specialist. A generalist puts the listing on the MLS and basically waits.
Waits for the market to come to them.
Yep. BSC has a proprietary computer database. They segregate properties by geographic and operational types.
Meaning they know who buys diners in South Jersey versus who buys nightclubs in North Jersey.
Precisely. They aren't broadcasting to the world. They are narrowcasting to the people who matter. They talk about instant matching with their list of registered prospective buyers.
So these are qualified investors already in their system. It's like a private marketplace.
It is. They also have their digital hub, 123bsc.com, where they feed real-time data on listings and financing trends.
So you're not waiting for the phone to ring. You're pushing the notification to the person you already know is looking for that specific asset class.
It's proactive versus reactive. And that leads to step 3, execution. This is where the rubber meets the road. They talk about screening to limit waste.
Limit waste is a polite way of saying, don't waste my time, isn't it?
It is, but it's crucial. In the restaurant business, time is the most expensive commodity. You cannot have tire kickers walking through your kitchen during dinner service asking questions.
That would be a nightmare.
You need to know the buyer is real, that they have the capital, and that they are serious. BSC pre-qualifies purchasers before they even get a tour. They're like a bouncer for the deal.
And then closing. They mentioned negotiating the price and, crucially, processing the liquor licenses.
Oh, yeah.
I want to pause on that because if you aren't in the industry, specifically in New Jersey, you might not realize how big of a hurdle that is.
It's massive. In New Jersey, liquor licenses are assets with a limited supply. They're incredibly expensive, sometimes more than the building itself.
And the transfer process is brutal.
Background checks, municipal hearings, police reviews, state approval. It can take months. If a broker drops the ball on a single form, the deal can die. BSC explicitly says they handle that process.
Which is a huge relief for any seller, I'm sure. Now, you mentioned not having tire kickers in the kitchen. That touches on Section 4 of our outline, the art of confidentiality.
Right.
This was fascinating to me. Usually when you sell something, you want to shout it from the rooftops, right?
No,
Maximum exposure.
not here. It's the paradox of business brokerage. The brochure calls it a delicate balance.
Walk us through the nightmare scenario. What happens if the word gets out too early?
Okay, so imagine you own a popular Italian restaurant. You put a for sale sign out front. The dishwasher sees it and thinks, I'm losing my job. So he quits. The head chef hears a rumor. The new owner is going to change the menu, so he starts looking for a new gig. The customers hear the owner's checking out, so they assume the food quality is going to drop. They stop booking parties.
So the revenue tanks?
And since the business is valued on its revenue, the sale price tanks. You have effectively destroyed the asset by trying to sell it. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure.
So how does BSC handle this? It sounds like a spy operation.
It's pretty close. They use discrete channels. They select marketing avenues that protect the business's identity. They often use a blind listing describing the type of business and the financials, but not the name or address.
And you don't get the full dossier until you've signed an NDA.
Exactly, after you've been vetted. They also mention staff management.
The psychological component.
For sure. They coach the seller on exactly when and how to tell the staff. Usually that happens very late in the game.
Right before closing.
The goal is to present it as a positive transition. Here is the new owner, your jobs are safe, rather than a period of uncertainty. It's managing human behavior in a high-stress transition.
It's not just finance, it's HR management.
Absolutely. It's about maintaining stability.
Now, we've talked a lot about selling existing restaurants, but BSC has another arm that seems even more ambitious. Section 5, financing and development.
Right. They act as a capital intermediary. They facilitate commercial financing, SBA loans, even private equity. Because they understand the business valuations, separating the real estate value from the business value, they can present a package to a bank that actually makes sense.
But the development division is where they really flex their muscles. It says they launched this over 30 years ago.
And they have a very, very bold quote in this section.
I saw it.
We have never failed to obtain an approval.
I circled that twice. Never failed. In the world of land development, that is a staggering claim.
It is. If you know anything about zoning boards and municipal red tape, you know that approvals are never guaranteed. People spend millions on studies and still get voted down.
So how are they doing it, and what are they building?
Well, they aren't just building drive-thrus anymore. They have evolved into major residential projects. They mentioned 4 seasons at Millville. That's 614 active adult homes.
Wow.
With a value of $185 million.
That is a massive jump from selling a diner.
It is. And Seaview Island at Shark River. That's 198 waterfront townhouses and a 130-slip marina, valued at $90 million.
It really shows the scale of their operation. They start by selling a restaurant, but because they understand the land and the zoning, they can pivot to building a 600-home community.
And it speaks to that architect title again. They aren't just reacting to the market, they're literally building the market. It takes immense patience and specialized knowledge of local politics.
Okay, so we have the philosophy, the process, the development, but let's look at the actual track record. Proof in the pudding.
Their portfolio is surprisingly diverse. They call it a portfolio for every palate.
You're like that.
Restaurants and bars, obviously, but also golf courses and marinas, hotels and resorts, catering facilities, even amusements.
And they list some heavy hitters in the New Jersey scene.
They do. They mention the sale of Shadowbrook Estate in Shrewsbury.
That's a landmark.
It is. Sold to the Venetian Catering Group. Deals like that are incredibly complex. You have bookings years in advance. You can't just cancel someone's wedding because the building's sold.
True. They also mention Rooney's Oceanfront in Long Branch.
An institution. If you're from the Jersey Shore, you know Rooney's.
Yeah. And Moonstruck in Asbury Park, Woody's Ocean Grill, Danny's in Red Bank. These aren't just random storefronts. These are legacy businesses.
With deep community ties.
And they have the testimonials to back it up. I noticed a quote from Chef David Burke.
Right. He runs a massive culinary empire.
Yeah.
He called Richard Santore a connector and said working with him was the absolute smoothest.
And when a guy operating at David Burke's level says that, it carries weight.
It suggests they handled all the gritty details so he didn't have to.
Then you have the owners of Moonstruck. They praised Santore's patience and commitment.
That word patience is so telling. These deals can take months, sometimes years, Goes back to that relationship value we talked about.
They aren't looking for a quick flip.
No, they're looking to guide the client to the finish line, however long it takes.
Chris Wood from Woody's Ocean Grill summed it up pretty well, too. They know the key players, understand the market, and get the job done.
Which is really the only metric that matters, isn't it? It's about access, knowing who is actually buying, who has the money, and who can actually close.
So let's bring this all together. We've unpacked the architects of the deal. We've seen how they combine the role of a broker, a banker, and a developer. What is the big takeaway here for you?
I think the lesson is about the power of hyper-specialization. If you want to buy a house, you call a generalist. But if you want to buy or sell a legacy business involving liquor licenses and commercial debt, you cannot dabble.
You just can't.
BSC has spent nearly 50 years doing exactly one thing: hospitality real estate in New Jersey. They have built a moat of data and relationships that a generalist simply cannot cross.
It's the difference between a general practitioner and a brain surgeon. When the stakes are that high, you want the specialist.
Exactly. And they have leveraged that specialization to expand into development. They took their knowledge of dirt and approvals and scaled it up to $100 million projects. It's a brilliant business model.
It really is. I keep coming back to that line.
Your never failed line.
We have never failed to obtain an approval. It sticks with you.
It does.
And here is a thought I want to leave our listeners with. We often talk about real estate value being about location, location, location.
Mm-hmm.
But listening to this and looking at BSC's model, I wonder if the true value in the modern world is actually certainty.
That is a profound thought.
Think about it. In a world of red tape, changing zoning laws, community pushback, and volatile markets, a firm that can guarantee an approval, that can offer certainty that a project will actually happen, might be selling the most valuable commodity of all.
The ability to navigate the bureaucracy.
Right. Perhaps that specialized knowledge is actually worth more than the land itself.
I think you might be right. In a complex system, the navigator is king.
Something to chew on the next time you drive past a new development or sit down for dinner at your favorite spot. Someone had to engineer that deal. That's it for this deep dive into Bielat Santore and Company. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.